All four Gospels recount Jesus' entry into the temple complex at Passover and him driving out the merchants who were selling sacrificial animals and exchanging money. It is always striking when all the Gospels include a particular memory in their account, all of them. Obviously, this event made quite an impression. John's Gospel paints the most vivid picture of them all, for in it, Jesus not only overturns the tables of the merchants, but he chastises them. He pours out their coins onto the ground, and he drives out the merchants and the animals with a whip of cords that he himself made. Jesus was full of righteous anger, and it was unforgettable. The event is known as the cleansing of the temple. God's temple must be pure, but it had become profane by corrupt practices. Often when people went to the temple, they wanted to make sacrifices according to the Mosaic law. An ox, a sheep, or a dove, depending on the occasion. And so it was convenient to have animals available to be purchased and used in those ceremonies. Except that the law required that any animal that was going to be sacrificed in the temple had to be pure and spotless, without blemish. The temple authorities were the appointed inspectors who examined each animal to see that they were up to code. There was a fee for this inspection, but that was not the biggest problem. The bigger problem was that the temple authorities arranged it so that no animal would pass inspection except for the ones that they sold. And the merchants charged outrageous prices for these necessary animals. It was blatant extortion, a racket, if you will. The money exchange was part of the racket as well. And the way it worked is you had to have a special temple coin in order to buy the animals. And so you had to exchange your regular Roman coins for the temple coins. And guess what? You paid a premium for that too. The customers / victims, they were the faithful poor, the ones who could afford it the least, and they paid the most. This is reminiscent of the widow in Luke's gospel who gave everything that she had to live on to the temple. A travesty. This same corruption holds true today. For example, payday loans for the working poor, which charge exorbitant interest rates. And in certain churches around the world, where so-called televangelists prey on the poor with promises of financial blessings. You can think of some more. The whole thing set Jesus off. His actions are called prophetic sign acts. It was a most extraordinary display. Where else have we ever seen Jesus lash out? Nowhere. Jesus was not temperamental. He was not an angry or violent man by any means. Yet the perversion of the law by the religious authorities had to be forcefully condemned, overturned, just like those tables were. Jesus' action made three major points pertaining to the law. The first is that profiteering at the expense of the poor and vulnerable is unacceptable in any case. But when that profiteering is in God's house of prayer, it is downright satanic. Isn't it just like Satan to misuse the law? That's why the spirit of the law is at least as important as the letter of the law. The second point is that God does not want killing. Thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not kill, whether it be animals or humans. Instead, as the psalmist says, the sacrifice of God is a broken and contrite heart. It's our hearts that Jesus wants, not burnt offerings. In his prophetic action, Jesus is ending the killing of lives. His third prophetic act came in response to his adversaries' sarcastic and ignorant request for Jesus to give them a sign. It's like they weren't paying attention, like they were spiritually blind. You see, he was already giving them signs. Signs about justice, signs about love, signs about the heart of the law. But he said in response to their tedious questions that his sign would be the destruction of the temple and its rebuilding in 3 days. He was signaling several things at once: that he would be killed by them and then resurrected in 3 days, because he is the ultimate power and not them. He was also signaling that his life, death, and resurrection is the perfect expression of the law lived to its fullest, in utter contrast to the perversions his enemies perpetuated in the name of the law. Finally, he was signaling that he, Jesus, is the true home of God, the temple, and not some lifeless stones. St. Paul extended this idea further when he asked the Corinthians, "Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit?" I wonder how many of us realize that we are a temple of God, each one of us, that his Holy Spirit dwells in us too, that we are houses of prayer. We are God's building just as much as the Jerusalem temple was, but in a different way. And we too are subject to corruption. It's possible for things to get out of order in our lives. We, like the temple authorities, can misuse our bodies, minds, language, talents, etc. We too can justify ourselves by appealing to the letter of the law. We too can push out of our lives the heart of God and make ourselves into a marketplace or a den of thieves. So we can, and we do, profane ourselves. And when this happens, we need to be cleansed. But we can't do it ourselves. We think we can, but we can't. This is not a DIY project, as they say. Jesus says that when people try to cast out evil by themselves, they create a vacuum. And into that vacuum comes more evil spirits. No, we can't do it ourselves. Jesus has to do it. For when Jesus comes into our lives and cleanses us, he fills us with himself, and we are restored. Lent's a time for him to do that for us again. A time for asking Jesus to come in and drive out all that is base and corrupt and unworthy in us. It's a time to be still and to ask Jesus to come into our temple and cleanse us and purify us and fill us. And all we have to do is let him in.